The most amazing thing about this gospel reading is that Cleopas was second cousin to Jesus. He was literally Jesus' own family member. Mary, who is the cousin of the Blessed Virgin, is the mother of Cleopas. We see that in the New Testament. So we know that that's the second cousin, the cousin-child, just very close relationship. I'm sure all of you have cousins and second cousins. How would you not recognize them on the road? You have your own family, someone that you've known from childhood, passing you on the road, and you do not recognize them. You can say that their eyes were full of tears. You can say that the stress of Jesus' crucifixion was overwhelming. You can say that the destruction that they had witnessed had shocked them to the core of their being. And yet, none of us would pass by one of our cousins on the road and not recognize them. Jesus, however, was transformed. Not only did he not look like he did here on the cross, as he took on the burden of sin for our salvation and went to his death through all the pain and suffering that we just celebrated in Holy Week. Not only was he transformed, his body was healed, he was glorified. But we know from the early church fathers that Jesus Christ at this time literally glowed with the light of the resurrection. And so probably his cousin, Cleopas, couldn't see his face clearly. And maybe because they were outside on a pathway leaving Jerusalem, he didn't recognize that it wasn't the sun shining down on Jesus, but that it was Jesus himself that was outshining the sun. Maybe this was the reason he did not recognize Jesus on the road. But we know things for certain, that Jesus did not force the recognition. Jesus did not make his cousin recognize him. I just yesterday, my first time in Cebu, learned that you often call each other brother and sister. And I am very overwhelmed by the beauty of that. Even if you don't know someone, you still can call them brother or sister because it makes you feel close to them. This is the same thing that Jesus often did. We see in Aramaic, he calls his disciples kon. Kon in Aramaic literally means the same thing, it's brother. So Jesus Christ was very broy towards his disciples. He was very much a friend to those that he was discipling, to his apostles. And yet, in the midst of all this, Jesus does not hug Cleopas and say, "Bro, you do not recognize me?" He didn't force the recognition. Jesus allowed Cleopas to mourn. He allowed Cleopas to vent. He allowed Cleopas to say those things that were bothering him, those things that were deep in his heart. And then, as he expressed these things and his disappointment about what had happened to Jesus Christ, what did Jesus do? He heard, and then he rebuked. He said, "You're foolish. Jesus, the Messiah, was supposed to do these things." And then he went through the entire story and told them again the economy of grace, the revelation of God's plan for mankind's salvation. And in this economy, in this grace-filled story, Jesus, point for point, showed them how these things occurred and why they occurred. Unlike us, Jesus, fully God and fully man, is able to contextualize every difficulty that he faced and that we face. Anytime we face something that is too much for us to bear, we go to Jesus Christ and we tell him what is on our heart. We allow him to know our inner struggles, our difficulties, our bitterness. And what does he do? He hears us and then he convicts us. He tells us that we're foolish because we do not trust him enough. We do not believe in his power to transform our lives. And what does he do? He puts us back on the road. He walks with us back towards Emmaus. He walks with us, accompanies us, and he explains why our lives have had the difficulties that we've had. And in the midst of all of this, Jesus doesn't force us to recognize him. Just like he didn't force Cleopas, his cousin, to recognize him. He never forces us to do anything. And that is the sweetness of Jesus Christ. That's the difficulty of following Jesus Christ. Because Jesus never makes you do anything. He always allows you to make the choice. He always calls you to himself. He always extends to you his grace, his love, his friendship, but he never makes you do any of these things. And so this morning, as we meditate on the scripture that Father Paul just read, I want to bring these things home. God always exceeds our expectations. Just like Simon going up into the temple and the beggar man having an expectation that he would get some little morsel of food to eat, some little gift from the apostles. The apostles turned and said, I have no silver, I have no gold, but such as I have, I give unto thee. Arise and walk. Shocking. Amazing. This is something that completely exceeds our expectation. This was not what the beggar man was asking for. And yet Simon Peter, full of the grace of Jesus Christ, full of the power of the resurrection, he calls him to walk. Just like Jesus called Cleopas to continue on, to walk with him to Emmaus. And Jesus did say that he was going to go on. He broke the bread and he disappeared. Jesus was revealed in the breaking of the bread, and he exceeded everyone's expectations. That is the message of our scripture reading this morning. He exceeds what we desire from him if we only ask, if we only follow, if we only with a heart of true faith decide that we are going to follow him. And when we follow Jesus Christ, he will exceed everything in your heart and mind, everything that you can think of or imagine. God has more in store for you than you know. And so I would like for all of you to take this message during Bright Week, this week after Easter, this most blessed of all weeks, into your lives, into your hearts, by radically following after Jesus Christ. You don't have to understand, but you do have to trust. You do have to follow. And Christ will reveal himself. You have to ask him, because he never will make you do anything. So I've said these things to you in the name of the Father, and the Son,